I used to make films when I was younger. One of my favorite movies ever on a set was we had an experienced actor and an inexperienced crew, and the crew member could not figure out how to use electronic clapper.
Oh,
And
boy.
the actor walked by, never broke his stride, reached over, turned it on, and kept going.
Okay. We're good?
Yep.
All right, well, please rise, and I'll call the meeting to order, and we'll rise and start the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So first up, we have a presentation tonight, Larry? Yeah, I just need a little bit to get. Sure. So it will be an overview of the proposed school budget by Assistant Superintendent of Business Carol Stein. Once Larry figures it out. See you in a second. Hi, Carol. You're on. You just have to unmute yourself.
I'm just starting my camera here.
Okay.
Let's see if I can get the video to go. Okay, so you got my video. Good evening,
go,
everybody.
yeah.
You can hear
Good
me?
evening. Thanks for coming. Yeah.
Okay.
MC.
All right, let me just get my.
You're free to share your screen when you want to.
Okay. Okay, can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, very good. Okay, so thank you for allowing us to speak tonight. We will, I will just briefly go through the budget so that the voters and the people that are attending to the village who may not have the opportunity to or have not had the chance to go to the school meetings can get a sense of what the vote will be on May 17th. So each of our every budget year we start with our strategic plan and our vision. And so this really basically talks to some of the key elements that we're looking at as we develop the budget in terms of, you know, social emotional growth, academic growth, of course, maintaining our facility, maintaining a high quality staff, but yet we're always looking at our fiscal health and making sure that it's very sustainable. We also look at our strategic objectives. I won't read every single one. We put this throughout the district all the time. It's on our website. And these underpin everything that we looked at when we're making requests for new items or just maintaining our program. The budget process is a kind of a long process in the school district. We start early, November, December. We start, you know, analyzing where we're at. I'm starting to calculate what I'll talk about later in a minute is the push ahead budget. Then we're looking at our state aid numbers. We start to present it in February, each section. And the board along the way makes recommendations. They ask questions. We make refinements. We also get new information. So it's a long process. And it culminates with the board adopting the budget, usually about the third week of April. That's kind of when they have to do it. It's so that we can get everything ready for the vote in May. The key point I want to make here is that all of our prior budget presentations are posted on our website. They're in order, so we don't like put the new one up over the old one. So everything is there, so you can actually see the whole development process. And all of our meetings are recorded. So if anyone really wants to go into some of the detail, which I won't do tonight, it's all there on the website for you to look at. In addition, we put detailed backup sheets that have more of the real nitty gritty for those that like that. So the first thing we're calculating is what we call our push ahead budget, which is, you know, if we don't change any programs, what we will have to spend the following year. And a lot of it is salaries and benefits. I'll talk later, but it's 75% of our budget. So we calculate that based on the contracts we have and any other known variables. We look at our facilities, any needs. We look at some of the BOCES expenditures. We are one of the members districts in the Southern Westchester BOCES. We look at all of our technology infrastructure and needs there. And we look at our student population. There's a lot of special ed costs that we have that are important to meet for the individual students. And then we look at other boring things like insurance, transportation, and even debt service. So when we do that, that push ahead budget this year came to an increase of approximately $1.5 million. And then we'll talk about revenue in a minute, but I know this is the more interesting part, is the expenditures. And then we start looking at what else we really want to do. And then we come up with what we call our new considerations. And this is where the board weighs in a little more heavily in terms of how we're going to be moving in our direction. So our new considerations this year, we'll be adding in an additional custodian. We have found especially through COVID and just with the addition of buildings and our growth, that we are lacking in some of our custodial time. And we've been using a lot of overtime to achieve the cleanliness of the buildings and just to meet the needs even of setups and everything else that we're doing. We are looking to add a special education teacher to meet program needs. We are looking to add a master reading teacher. And hopefully this will help us to target some of the students that have some particular reading difficulties, and also maybe prevent some students from actually having to enter into, specialized individual education plan. We talked long through the presentation and the process about having a technology integration teacher, and the board and the administration concluded that it was a little bit early to do that, and we were going to do a little more professional development and see what direction we wanted to go. But it is part of our technology plan to integrate and continue to give professional development so that we can integrate technology. And we've seen that we've had a big need for that through COVID, and many of the technologies that we're maybe not using for hybrid learning or even remote learning anymore are still very usable in today's world. We're adding half an art teacher, we call it 0.5 FTE art teacher, who will be, which will help eliminate shared staff between our buildings and increase our offerings. A lot of students have found they couldn't take it because we didn't have enough sections, and that's not something we ever want to see in our schools. We're finding a huge need for elementary counselors. We're adding one this year. We've had one that's been shared between our two elementary schools, and this will allow us to have one that's dedicated to each school. So they're more responsive and they can react when there's a crisis, which is happening more frequently. Diversity, equity, inclusion, we're adding a coordinator. So the district, I'm sure you've heard a lot about the efforts that we've been doing to integrate more diversity, equity, inclusion programs in our curriculum and in programs and analysis. And so this coordinator will help us lead that effort going into the future. We're taking some of our department chairs to full-time. They had been a little bit more part-time, and now we're making some of these areas full-time. And then we're adding a coordinator stipends to coordinate our senior internship, which happens starting now. And then also to help the athletic director with all of the various rescheduling and programmatic needs that occur. So all of those come to approximately a little under $600,000. I'm not going to go through this, but it's here, and this presentation is also posted, but these are some of the rationales and the strategic plan that go with each one of those items that I discussed. So I really won't take the time tonight, but if you want to go to our website and see this full presentation, it's there. So I'm just going to kind of flip through these. Depending on our audience, some really want to know more details, and others, I just want you to know it's here. So it's the same thing I just kind of gave you highlights on. But just to let you know, these proposals do align with our strategic objectives. They represent our commitment to maintaining and enhancing student learning experiences. Like you can see that with the master reading teacher and the art. Expand the continuum of special ed. You can see that with the special ed teacher, and also through the push ahead budget, where we're maintaining all of the necessary programs that we have. We're going to continue to support students' developmental and educational needs. We're providing ongoing professional development. It was one of the new asks for that. We're offering continued social and emotional support for our students, and development of a well-aligned curriculum for social emotional learning. And we're going to continue our focus on diversity, equity, inclusion. So as I said, these considerations were under consideration the whole process, and many were modified as we went through the process. So then we look at the revenue part of the budget, and really the revenue does drive the expenditures, because if you don't have the revenue, you can't expend the money. And this year we were fortunate, and I have highlighted in yellow the very large increase in state aid. So the state finally did catch up some with our foundation aid. This is the year 2 where we've had some larger increases, and we expect actually a third year for one more year of an increase. It won't be 928,000 because that also reflects other components of aid, but the foundation aid did go up a considerable amount in this year. So we're fortunate, as you can also see from the slide, that our tax levy is only at 1.8. Okay, so so when I look at the tax levy, if I quickly go back to that slide, you see that we're only going up 1.8%. So I always call this slide when is 2% not for 2%, because everybody thinks of the levy cap as being a 2% number, but it really isn't, because there's other factors that go along with that. Just going back, so basically, but the levy is still a largest percentage of our revenue at 89%. State aid fortunately has increased now somewhat, so that's a positive trend. We do take in some tuition students. We get sales tax revenue from the county, and then we have some other miscellaneous funds of revenue. So when you put the revenue and the expenditures together, you do get a balanced budget. As I mentioned, we have 1.5 million in the push ahead budget. The actual tax levy alone would not have sustained that. We would have probably had to make some cuts. So fortunately, we did have some increase in the state aid this year. And this slide actually just shows it by category. So one shows it more by the function area, and this shows it by the category. So salaries, benefits, facilities, debt service, and transportation and supplies. So we look at it in different ways all the time. And this particular is a chart by the category. And as I mentioned before, 75% of our budget is made up of salaries and benefits, and that's not unusual. We're in the people business. We have a lot of staff. We have teachers, we have aides, we have custodians, we have clerical, and we have administrators. All great people working for the district. So when you look at the trends year over year, it's slightly higher this year in terms of a percentage. But again, the big increase is because it was from state aid and not from the taxpayer. So you'll also see from this slide that our tax rate is actually projected to be a little bit down from last year. And that has to do with the assessed valuation having increased. So that's probably good news. I guess it really depends on each person, because if you're one of the people that had increased, then you may be paying a little bit more. But if you're someone else who had decreased, you pay a little bit less. And everybody can figure out their own tax rate is by taking the assessed value of property and then multiplying it by that projected tax rate. And I say it's projected because it's based on the March assessment roll, and that will change again when we finalize it in August, when the town of Greenberg finalizes it for us. And this tax rate is updated to reflect the adopted veterans exemption that we just recently passed about a month ago. These are all the discussions that we have tonight, being the village one. You can see it right here. And that's essentially it for our presentation. I could go into more detail, but I know you have a lot to go on to tonight. And I do encourage everybody to go through to our website. I have all the detail there, and all of the meetings have been recorded. But I'm happy to answer any questions you have at the moment, or if you can just want to move on.
I think when eventually it all adds up to a negative tax increase, I think there's usually less questions. Again, we thank you for giving our meeting viewers the opportunity to hear it, kind of an easy way. And as you say, they can always replay this one or watch another one or replay any of the other ones, so they can definitely get all the information, as well as get more information, as you say, go through those detailed slides on the increases on your website. So we appreciate the tradition of you guys presenting at our meetings and getting this out there for everyone, because it obviously is the biggest piece of everyone's tax bill each year, property tax bill. So we appreciate you guys coming and presenting with us as well.
And we thank you for the opportunity. So I'll just remind everybody the vote is on May 17th. It's at the Main Street School gym, which is a slightly new location. We're just moving it from the auditorium to the gym. We hope to see everybody there voting.
Any questions, comments? Otherwise, we'll let you move on to the rest of your evening.
Thank you very much. Enjoy.
Thank you, Carol. Next up, we have announcements. I only have one, which is Memorial Day Ceremonies and Parade will be Monday, May 30th at 10:45 a.m. The only thing I'll add to that is if anybody has a village group that is interested in marching in the parade is back this year, and we'd love to include your group if they wanted to march in the parade. So you don't need to do anything special. you can email me and I'll take care of it. That's bsmith@irvingtonny.gov. And we'll get you in touch with the folks organizing the parade. But I think that's we're excited. There's, been a group, Nina Caparel Dawson and Rich Park have been working very hard on kind of expanding the ceremony and specifically bringing the parade back. So we're excited about that. I don't know if anybody else has any other announcements.
I believe that they're still looking for anyone that might have an antique car that wants to participate in the parade or something.
Oh, and one other thing, if there's any veterans that would like to participate, we're trying to reach out to and invite as many veterans as possible. So,
And they can ride in the antique car.
yes, or march, or none of it. We just want to we just want a list so we can invite them and make sure that they're aware of what's happening. So we did have veterans in the past say they didn't know we were having ceremonies, both for Veterans Day and Memorial Day. I just want them to feel both welcome and ask them to participate if they're comfortable doing so. What we have for announcements. As far as correspondence, we had one piece of correspondence received in advance from Peter Rudieri. That's actually about one of our public hearings, so I will hold that over to the public hearing. And then I will move on to public comment. If anybody has anything not about the public hearing, either at home on Zoom or in the audience. Nobody there? Okay, so I'll move on to the consent agenda. Anyone have questions or comments? Through the consent agenda?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Next, I will make a motion to open a public hearing and consider a local law amending the village code with respect to children's outdoor recreational apparatus and sheds. If I can have a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The public hearing is now open. So this was something that we talked about for years. A lot of the feedback we get from people is I'm buying a $900 shed from Home Depot and I have to spend $5,000 on architectural drawings, a new survey, and then go to the planning board. For smaller sheds and for smaller play sets, we just thought that was kind of overreach and not what's necessary. Also kind of doing an informal survey of where sheds are located. Many of them are currently either illegally in the setbacks and a lot of them look like they haven't been maintained because of that. So people can't replace them because they know they have to go through the whole planning board process for a relatively inexpensive item. That's, some people even say it's temporary. I could literally pick it up and move it if I had to. So that's basically, that was the overall original intent of this. I think we added in what is the wording? The children's outdoor recreational apparatus. When a recent, this was a planning board application as well, came up, and we kind of said, do we really want to be regulating a swing set or a small playhouse the same way that we do a building? And I think we came up with the answer of no. We obviously know that there, someone could potentially build a castle or something, which still we do have some limiting size. I would say one other thing is that some of the feedback we received on this was why 12 feet. I think when we did some original research on the size of sheds, kind of the largest 8x8 shed was 12 feet. But Larry and I, in our Google degrees, put it in the use and found that the vast majority are 10 feet or less. So that's one proposal I would potentially make to the board is to reduce the height from 12 feet to 10 feet, because that seems that that would cover the vast majority of kind of pre-built or easy to assemble sheds, and it is obviously 2 feet shorter than we originally proposed. That's kind of my overview, Marianne. I don't know if you want to go through a little more detail.
Yeah, let me go. You know what, I'm gonna take my hands from this. Got my glasses. Okay, it's kind of a long law because there's a bunch of conditions. So I'll go through the things one by one. The first thing it does is it defines two new terms. One is the children's outdoor recreational apparatus, which includes, things like trampolines, sandbox, jungle gym. I have to say, Brian, there is no size limit there is a size limit on
On
playhouses.
sheds, on playhouses. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. I was talking about playhouses and sheds.
Yeah, right, playhouses can, once they're bigger than 35 feet, they're regulated by the code, but those aren't covered by this. So, and then shed is defined. Okay, then the next thing, the local law does is it modifies the definition of building, so as not to include children's outdoor recreational apparatus and shed. And the reason, and not all sheds, I'm sorry, sheds no larger than 64 square feet in area and 12 feet high, which you might end up changing to 10 feet in height. The reason removed from the definition of building is then they won't require a building permit and they won't require site plan review. So that's actually a pretty big change over what's now. Is add children's outdoor recreational apparatus and sheds as permitted uses in one-family residence districts. And that would then cascade down to two-family and multifamily. But that's not really, that's not new to a lot. It's just the code fixed to include, use the proper term. Then the next thing, and this is another big change, doesn't have a paved foundation and isn't greater than 64 square feet in area or 12 feet in height. And children's outdoor apparatus may be erected anywhere on the lot. Right now, they can't be within the setback. Provided it could be anywhere on the lot except as provided there, but they would need a wetlands permit if they're going to be allowed there. It's provided in the Croton aqueduct buffer, and I'll get to that back to that in a minute. And then front facade of the dwelling facing a street or public way. In front of the front facade of the dwelling is facing the public way. Okay, then the next section says that in the Croton aqueduct buffer that children's outdoor recreation apparatus and any shed, irrespective of the size, aren't allowed. And the reason that has to be specified is right now, it says you can't have a building there, but the way we redefine building, it doesn't include these things, so now it has to be thrown back in, both for the Croton aqueduct buffer and the freshwater wetlands, and that's what that section 7 is about. Then another change is that you will not include smaller shed, the ones I described before, in floor area ratio in residential zones. So if you shed bigger than 64 feet, it gets included in floor area ratio. If it's under 64 square feet, it doesn't have a paved foundation and isn't over 12 feet in height, then it's FAR. We didn't have to make that change for swing sets because swing sets aren't currently included in FAR. Okay, and then the other sections of this law or other chapters of the code that have to be for other sections of the code, like the building construction code and building permits, to make it jive with the change that just done, right? Nothing substantive there. Okay, let me just make sure it's there. Yeah, that covers everything.
Did we get any feedback from Ed on this?
Yeah.
We did but that was before this was
Yeah,
all
before it went
finalized.
over, yeah,
Yeah.
I told Larry to go over it with that, and it was fine with that.
Yep.
I mean, it doesn't pose any problems for him to recognize it's up to the board having a regulation.
Anybody on the board have anything they want to say before we open it up to the public comments?
I had something I was just going,
Go ahead, Mark.
oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, with the delay. I was just going to say, Brian, I agree with the notion of reducing it to 10 foot, because I think that's more reasonable in the long run. And most, like you said, most sheds fall within that category.
I was going to agree with that reduction to 10 feet and just make a general comment that I think the board was and continues to try to make things a bit easier for residents to make improvements or changes that can be done. And recognize that there were some concerns by some people that there were certain situations where there may be an advantage taken. But I think certainly I felt, and I think the rest of the board agreed, that we're really legislating for 98 and 99% of the issues. And if there's a smaller percentage of issues where there conceivably could be a problem, we hope good neighbors and reason can handle those individual cases. We don't want to legislate for the 1% of the situations, which will then not allow the large percentage of people, as Brian said, who have existing sheds that they may have bought that years in a corner and on a lot, and they can't take it down because to take it down is going to cost you thousands of dollars to just put up. We have looked at some of the models of both the children's play sets and the sheds and found them to be reasonable in terms of size and appearance. So I think that was one of the other issues that had been brought up.
All right, what do we decide on number of sheds? We didn't. Like you had 2 sheds that are under 64 square feet. I think we didn't.
We didn't, the only thing we're saying is, it's an FAR, you can only the check.
One doesn't count.
Included in FAR, but the number otherwise doesn't affect where they could be, or whether they need building.
So do we give preference to people that are here in person first? Does anybody here want to talk on this particular one? Yeah, please. Hi.
My name is Al Milo, live on Meadowbrook Road. I'm just confused about where on the lot are these allowed to be placed? It's the wording that just is confusing to me.
You want to cover that?
Yeah, they would be allowed, excluding the 12 aqueduct buffer and wetlands, okay?
Right.
Anywhere on the lot, except in front of the front facade of the building, if the building space is.
When you say the front facade, in other words, in front of the building itself?
In front of the front, yeah, just, for instance, let's say it's corner house,
Okay,
I mean, one of them is the front facade, the other is the side, so it could be in front of the sidewalk, but it can't be in front of the front facade.
okay. In other words, but it could be close to the street if it's not in front of the building itself.
Yes, so let's say the building is.
That could be very dangerous. Because
Okay, but I'll just explain what the lot is. So if it's on a corner lot like this, and it can't be here, but it could be, yes, it could be near the street here.
Okay. The reason I'm saying it could be dangerous, if it was a play set. I almost ran over a kid once that ran into the street that, had a play set right near the street. Luckily I put the brakes on. It was in Staten Island when I was in the Army. Very dangerous. The kids, all the parent has to do is turn around for 2 seconds and the kid could be running off someplace. Unless there's a fence. That's all I want to say.
Thank you. Anybody online? I do have the 2 pieces of correspondence.
Yeah, I have one.
Oh, Peter's
Yep.
online.
Yeah, hold on. Peter?
Good evening.
Peter?
Can I just clarify one, well, maybe 2 other things? Al asked my first question. My second is when it says that it's as long as the shed doesn't have a paved foundation. Usually that would be like the whole floor would be paved in concrete, but if it's sitting on structural footings like a deck, is that excluded also, or is that okay under this definition of a shed?
Um, I don't, I don't know, I can't quite picture it, and maybe you could tell me why it would make a difference. Because it mostly, if it were on the deck, it's outside of the setback. Anyway,
Well, I'm just envisioning that if it could be um, on foundations, on post foundations, then you could custom build a shed of any shape. And it leaves open a much larger number of types of sheds than what might be available at Home Depot. And as a neighbor suggested to me, it could possibly be 2 feet by 32 feet long. You could custom build a shed on, on post foundations. It would be like a wall on your property line. That's why I think of that question. But it could still have a dirt floor.
yeah, well, that wouldn't be, I would say that would not be a paved foundation, and if it were 2 by 32, the 64 square feet, so yes, it would be a lot.
Okay. And I'm also curious, those temporary storage pods that people rent and they put in their yards, sometimes when they are doing construction to put their furniture. Are those allowable obstructions in yards at this time? I don't know whether they would, most of them are probably bigger than 64 square feet, but can you tell me how that would be interpreted?
I'm not sure.
You probably, I mean, check how the building department would
Yeah,
interpret
I'm
that.
not sure. Yeah,
Okay,
I don't know how to do it.
all right. So,
Many codes do have separate provisions on them. Our code doesn't, so it's just how the building department deals with them.
okay. So I had a personal experience, which is that we renovated our rear windows behind our dining room about 5 years ago, and it gave us the main view, the nice view for the entire house. All of the living room, dining room, all looks out there. It looks great. And we spent a lot of money. And 2 months later, a neighbor put one of those storage pods right on his rear property line and side lot line, directly in front of our new windows. And it just ruined the whole view. It ruined the whole aspect. And they stayed there for more than 2 years. I did ask Ed Marin at the time, and he felt that it was more like a temporary thing, like having a vehicle in your yard. So that's why I asked you whether, as town attorney, you had a different interpretation. He said that if I wrote a letter, he would look into it further. And I never did. I ended up working it out with, by that time, 2 years had passed. But my point about the sheds that are clearly under this amendment is that they can be very obtrusive. The whole point of a yard is to preserve the neighbor's views, and just walking around the lot, the block basically from my house. Of course, I do see all those non-compliant sheds, but you could easily put a shed now 10 feet high that would be within 10 or 15 feet of a neighbor's windows, right up against your property line, blocking his view. He would be looking at the side of a shed. And I think, I would think that you could still preserve that. You could still protect those neighbors. The process of having to go through the planning board, could be simplified, but to allow those sheds, and now, right up to the shop property line, right up against the neighbor's property, could be, as I say, just very obtrusive, very noxious. Um, to enlarge on what Al Milo said, if they can be, since you clarified that they can be anywhere in the front of the property, as long as they're not directly in front of the house, that that affects the whole streetscape, the whole appearance of the neighborhood to have a lot of these sheds out there. I just think it's a big detriment to the built environment, and it doesn't really gain much if you're just trying to give regulatory relief to people who want a shed in their yard. You could perhaps take it out of the planning board's purview, just have Ed Marin decide, just have them sketch where it's going to be. He looks at the yards and he says, it's not in a yard, you're fine. If they want it in a yard, they can go for a variance. And if their neighbor signs on, that's fine. But if it's going to be straight in front of someone's windows, 10 to 15 feet away, blocking their view, I think it's a terrible obstruction and a nuisance. Not only that, it could be a fire hazard because these things can be combustible, and it could be dangerous because these are, a child driving his tricycle down the driveway could make a wrong turn and smash into his neighbor's lawn, his neighbor's shed that's right on the property line. So I think that's covers the way I feel about it, but I sure am glad that you are thinking of bringing it down to 10 feet rather than 12. If you do go through with this, I would think that something even lower than that might be appropriate, maybe 8 feet or even 6 if it's right on the property line. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else there?
Yes. Mr. Hernandez?
Okay. I don't have to read the letter.
Oh, hey, everybody. Good evening. I did submit a brief letter, but I just wanted to follow on to some of Peter's comments in that I do think that the relationship of dimensions of, width and length should be, something akin to what folks think of as a more traditional shed. And then secondly, and what I mean by that is something more resembling, a square rectangle than not. And then secondly, I think that there should be a special carve out for the view preservation overlay district. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else there? Is there initial what we heard? I mean, I think that, I'm not, to me, in a perfect world, you could have the building department say, because they can look at safety things or something. I'm just not sure if, I'd have to talk to Ed about that and see if it makes sense, but I don't know if that makes sense or not.
Brian?
When I was yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. When
Go
you're
ahead.
done, I had something to say.
I was going to say, when I was in East Irvington, that was kind of how it worked. You basically got a printout of your survey map, you kind of drew it on, gave it the plans, you gave it to the building department, and they said yes or no. I would still like to have all of these requirements, or the lack of requirements somewhat, where, wherever you want to say it, where it can be in the setbacks and things like that. So you wouldn't have to go to the zoning board, or the zoning board of appeals. That just doesn't make sense to
But
me.
why would you go to the building department then?
Just because if someone was building a 1 foot by 64 foot, that was really a fence, or, it's going to be a swing set that's right on Broadway, or, something that just doesn't make any sense from a safety standpoint or something like that. But, I tend to agree with what Mark said, that 99.9% are going to do the right thing. And I think that that's what we've seen. I don't think people want to build a shed to make a pseudo fence. I think that.
Yeah, but unless you've got it in your code, then it's gotta be a certain shape. I mean, I can't, if the code doesn't say you can't have a 2 by 32 foot shed, Ed can't then say, hey, you can't build it because I don't like the shape of it. Or
Well-
we don't think that's a good shape. So
Wouldn't it be just as simple to add 64 square feet with no side longer than 10 feet or something?
you could do that if you want.
Yeah, I was going to say something like the aspect ratio of the floor can't be more than 2 to 1 or something like that. So, you know,
That was-
10 feet by 20 feet or whatever it is, and that's too much as it is. But therefore, if it can't be larger than 2 to 1, you can't have a wall.
Yeah, I like Mark's idea better. I think a ratio is better than a foot amount.
How about the swing set safety issue? I mean, I think, to me, it's like, the parent is, I mean, I'd never like to say that, the parent would know better, but,
Right. Also, how many corners do we have that we can qualify?
A lot.
We do?
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess, as a parent, I can't imagine putting a swing set in an area that is
Front yard without a-
dangerous
yeah.
for my children.
Yeah.
But, so I think I agree, Larry, with what you said about sort of, you really are trying to make rules for most people, and, you always, you not necessarily legislate for that too. And I don't know how you get a parent, that puts a swing set super close, but I think that's probably pretty rare.
I mean, from my experience and listening to people, the parents are very concerned about safety of the kids near roads, and that's a lot of reasons fences are being requested in the village. So I find it hard to believe that unless, that you've got a parent that's going to get a new swing set and then put it next to the road and not have safety concerns initially. It just seems, I don't know, kind of a strange scenario to say the parent is blind to safety issues.
Marianne, do you think changing the height to 10 feet and adding that 2 to 1 ratio is a material change to carry it over?
Yeah, I mean, I think it has to be redrafted and carried over. I mean, not that the draft is going to take much. You really, I agree with Mitch that Mark's wording is pretty elegant, the aspect ratio, but I'm afraid it might not be as easy for somebody to understand the code. So maybe you just want to say with no side longer than 10 feet.
Sometimes basic is
Make it
better.
so I can say like, my dumber version is better, so that.
The more elegant
Oh,
version.
that's elegant, it's elegant, not dumber. If the board agrees, I think that might be.
I'm happy to be the poster child for,
Okay. But
I'm
then,
fine
yeah,
with
then
that change.
those changes.
I'm sorry?
I'm fine with that change.
I mean, I think that the bottom line, I think what we all want is that, that a point was raised that this could be abused in such a way. And I agree with Larry that we should be legislating for the 99%, not the 1, but that seems like a very simple change to avoid that 1% law. So whatever is the best way to draft it so that will be understandable to the building department, to the people reading the code, to everyone, then we should go that way.
Yeah, so it's not like it's a big drafting problem, we'll just take a couple, but it is a change, so you would.
Okay.
You
So I will just, I propose that we just keep the public hearing open and we'll carry it over. All right, we're good.
So the changes would be the height to 10 feet and the no wall longer than 10 feet.
Right.
So I will make a motion to open public hearing to consider a local law amending the village code to permit video conferencing to conduct meetings. If I can have a second.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
I think this is, fairly almost a procedural thing. Basically, we're complying with the new state laws or with the state code. They pass a local law, so I don't know if to walk us through it, Marianne.
Yeah, I mean, actually. Fine with the new state law, but I guess people should understand that, so this won't be under. I'll try to be brief. What the new state law does, and then hence our law, it authorizes public bodies to conduct meetings by video conference as long as a quorum of the body is physically present at a location where the public can attend in person. But now, in order for their provision to be effective in the municipality, first, the bill authorizing video conferencing either for itself and all its boards and committees, or specifying that each board can decide by itself. The law drafted here, you decide for all your boards and committees. Okay, and then next, after you adopt it, or something, the board here, before you start the video conferencing, the board has to adopt written procedures on public attendance and conspicuously post those on the village website. Again, members of the board must be physically present at the location public can attend unless the member is unable to be physically present and the language is due to extraordinary circumstances. But you'll set those forth in your written procedures, what you consider extraordinary circumstances. The law gave us examples of disability, illness, caregiver responsibilities, or any other significant or unexpected factor. I think we're gonna have to see how that plays out a little bit. If you say, somebody's on vacation, is that an unexpected factor? I don't know. I suppose there are circumstances where it could be, where both of it's, critical, whether it be taken or something, but you'll have to discuss it. And then let's see how this plays out a little bit too. The board has to make that if a member like Mark right now is video conference, that he can be identified, that who's speaking, and so that he can be seen and heard during the meeting. You couldn't just have a box with 7 mark in it. You would be able to be seen. The meeting minutes are going to have to specify that there was video conferencing and who was there, and the public notice for the meeting. We have to inform the public that video conference where the members of the public can come and where the members of the board will be meeting, how the public can participate, and where the relevant documents will be posted or otherwise available. And there's some other things related to minutes and stuff. And then there is an emergency. There are provisions for emergencies, but those would be emergencies that the government calls, or the government calls, the state calls them. And then the other thing, and now the way the law is written, it goes out of effect August, I think it's August 8, 2024. But my guess is, they'll extend it, but for the moment, that's when it would expire. And then remote meetings, the way they've been through COVID, if they've been authorized to extend to May of this year.
Okay, so it seems like the policy is going to be much more involved than the law itself.
Yeah, right, but before you can even do it, you've got to pass this law that says, it's okay to do it. And also specifying, which boards, and like I said, it's for all your boards.
Anybody have any comment on this? Anybody at home, Larry, want to talk about this very exciting law?
No.
Brian, can I just say one thing?
Sure.
The reason for all this vulnerable is not a huge change over what exists right now under the open meetings law, but the way the law reads now is boldly is if the public is available, if the public can go to that place.
Yeah.
So that everybody could go in Mark's basement and wherever he is. And so that's eliminated by this new law.
Yeah, that's my understanding too, pretty much. So we could have been doing this all along. It just, you would have kind of posted his address and everything.
Yeah. Mark, but.
No, anybody.
You stay home.
Party of my.
So if there isn't any additional public comment, I'll make a vote to close the public hearing. If I have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
If the actual, it doesn't really seem like there's just Oh, no, it's okay, it is here, actually. Be it enacted by the Board of Trustees of the Village of Irving as follows. Section 1, a new chapter is hereby added to the Village Code to read as follows. Chapter 44 meetings, 44, Section 44.1, video conferencing, as authorized by the newly enacted Section 103A of the New York Public Officers Law. Meetings of the Board of Trustees, Planning Board, Zoning Board of Appeals, Architecture Review Board, and all their boards and committees of the village may use video conferencing to conduct its meetings, provided that all requirements of the Public Officers Law, Section 103A, are met. Section 2, all ordinances, local laws, and parts thereof inconsistent with this local law are hereby repealed. And Section 3, this local law shall take effect immediately upon filing in the office of the New York State Secretary of State. I'll make a motion if I can have a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right. Next up is award of contract for the use and operation of heavy equipment. Anything to add here, Larry?
Yeah, we did a bid for heavy equipment contractors. I believe this is year 2 that we've had with our existing contract. So we did go out to bid like we've been doing, and we received a total of 4 bids that are listed in the resolution. The low bidder is 2XPC Corporation, which is also known as Those Guys Landscaping. And there's also a second low within contracting, both of whom we've done business with before. As you can see, Tom Bucci Excavating was the longtime excavating contract and was not the low bidder here. So, but we'll be recommending contract for the low bidder with a second backup of the second low bidder, Marcellus, and there.
Any questions on this? Or? All right, 4 bids were received for contract 2022-06 and the use and operation of heavy equipment as follows. 2XPC Corporation doing business as Those Guys Landscaping for $103,210 total bid. Marcellus and Jonathan Contracting for $103,827. Carl Dibble Inc. $104,999, and Tom Bucci Excavating $128,200. Whereas the village administrators reviewed the bids submitted and determined that all bids are responsive to the specifications, and resolved to award contract 2022-06 for the use and operation of heavy equipment in the amount of $103,210 to 2XPC Corporation doing business as Those Guys Landscaping as primary contractor, and to Marcellus and Jonathan Contracting as a secondary contractor, amount of $103,827,000. To authorize the village administrator to execute said contracts. I'll make the motion if I can have a second. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Continuation of Community Choice Aggregation Program. I feel like there's, you need updates on this one, Larry?
Deja vu, yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, this is an identical resolution to what you had only a couple of weeks ago, except that the new memorandum, which you're authorizing, has actually a higher price in it because the lower price that was set for the previous one was unsuccessful. I think they're in the unfortunate position of chasing the market at this point. But as a reminder, whatever they do finalize as an agreement here is only to extend the current contract, which expires June 30th. So this is to extend it for 6 months only. After June 30th, once this is extended, they will then undertake a larger effort to recruit additional contractors to extend the program even longer. And hopefully, their hope, of course, is that the market is a little bit more stable than it is now, but we'll see. But this is just a 6-month process here that you're agreeing to.
This one, it's both simple and confusing at the same time. Whereas by resolution 2015-123 and local law 2015-09, the village of Irvington established a community choice aggregation program in cooperation with Sustainable Westchester Inc., a not-for-profit organization not comprised of over 40 municipalities in Westchester County. Whereas the program is set to expire June 30, 2022. Whereas the village wishes to continue its participation in the program beyond June 30, 2022 expiration date. Now therefore be it resolved to approve a memorandum of understanding with Sustainable Westchester Inc. The associated energy services agreement subject to a compliant offer received an award made as required to continue the community choice aggregation program to authorize the village administrator to execute said documents, all subject to the final approval of the village attorney. I'll make a motion if I can have a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Authorization to sign contract for Rocktoberfest. Obviously, there's, I don't know, there's going to probably be at least a dozen different contracts, ranging in size probably from a couple $100s to about $5,000, give or take. We just thought it would be, rather than having to have every one of those come before the board to be approved, we kind of do a blanket authorization for the village administrator. Did we want to put a cap on this, Larry?
Yeah, I think, yeah, no, I think that makes sense. And that's, we talked about this earlier. We would put a total cap of $25,000, right, Brian? I think
Yeah,
that was,
I think that's more than we probably need, so.
That, I thought as a rule, that would be a responsible thing to do. Nothing, obviously, you know, I would trust.
Yeah, yeah.
Larry.
yeah, no,
Yeah.
we wanted to talk it out a little further just to be sure, but yeah.
Legal precedent,
Yep.
precedent for that. You know, you want to make sure that you're structurally doing things the right way, regardless of who the people are behind the structure.
Agreed.
I was going to throw that in my final resolve paragraph, sign contracts necessary for the production of the 22 Oktoberfest musical festival up to a total of $25,000, subject to review. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Any other questions on this? We are full steam ahead, and we're going to have fireworks this year, which isn't part of this contract, but
Fireworks at Oktoberfest.
yeah, it should be fun. And
Maybe close to a major band, a single band.
we, not really. That's why this is not more than $25,000. I think that the headliner is going to be another cover band. So another $5,000 cover band. I think the coolest thing was I got New York State to agree to light up the Tappan Zee Bridge green and white that day.
Wow.
Celebrate our anniversary. It was, the funniest thing was I had no idea how to do it. I literally went to the bridge website, clicked contact us, sent like a 2-paragraph email to them and said, you know, I don't know how to do this. I'm happy to, you know, go to the governor's office or my legislator, my senator, whatever. They said, we'd be honored to do it for you.
That's
You know,
awesome.
happy 150th anniversary. Have a great Oktoberfest.
That's great.
So we found some very capable state workers that, you know, and maybe they just never get anyone contacting them. It was gonna, so now I do it for every birthday.
September 24th is my daughter's birthday, and I'm just gonna tell her that's October.
Perfect, yeah.
Including the fireworks.
And tell her her favorite colors are green and white. Okay, so whereas the village intends to hold the Oktoberfest Music Festival in Madison Park in September 2022, whereas it will be necessary to quickly contract with various musical acts and other professionals. Now therefore be it resolved to authorize the village administrator to sign contracts necessary for the production of the 2022 Oktoberfest Music Festival up to a total of $25,000, subject to the review by the village attorney. Can I have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Tertiaries. This one's pretty straightforward now, and wasn't a surprise, I don't think either. So.
It was anticipated.
Yep. Okay. Then I'll start reading again. Whereas petitions having been filed by the Irvington Estates Owners, Inc., challenging real property tax assessments on the village of Irvington and the town of Greenberg's assessment rolls with respect to subject property for the 2018 to 2020 tax years with respect to the parcel designated as section 290 block 44 lot 22, Irvington Estates Owners, Inc., 14 South Broadway from 2018 to 2020. Whereas petitioner's actions are now pending in the Supreme Court, Westchester County, and whereas the town and the petitioner have reached a mutually agreeable resolution, now therefore the village is authorized to effectuate a settlement commensurate with the following terms. Proposed settlement for section 290 block 44 lot 22 for 2018. The original, it's actually the same for all years. The original assessment was $8,246,800. The revised assessment is $7,432,000 for reduction of $814,800. Again, in all 3 years. The village of Irvington share of the refund is $19,108.86. So I will make a motion if I can. All in favor? Aye. And we actually have a bonus agenda item here, 13A, which is appointment of a volunteer firefighter. We got this late, I think we got an email, but resolved to approve the following new probationary member of the Irvington Fire Company, Sean Foley. I'll make a motion if I can get a second. All in favor? Good luck, Sean. Hope it's quiet. But we want him to be able to respond to call right away. So next up is discussion of the formation of a diversity, equity, and inclusion committee. This is the first time we've actually discussed it as a group. I know we've gotten a couple emails about it. I don't know if Arlene, did you want to maybe kind of lead off and tell us what you envision?
Sure. So I think one of our village priorities is to continue to be a welcoming and inclusive community. And I think, you know, the village does certain things, you know, certain celebrations. I guess this is maybe how it started, but what things do we celebrate? What things do we value? You know, we celebrate, you know, we have Christmas, the menorah lighting, the tree lighting. I just think if we're saying we're inclusive and welcoming an inclusive community, we have to give some thought as a village to all these different aspects of what we do and whether we can be more inclusive. Do we have a pride celebration? How do we, you know, do we include that? Do we not include that? And I think those issues, really, we need a committee of residents to talk about those things. You know, we talked a bit about on the police review committee, we talked about diversifying our police force, which, you know, we started to do, and just really thinking about a more systemic overall these issues and in the village, how do we respond? You know, how do we give some real, the word I want to say there, but we really put something behind that, you know, that we are a welcoming and inclusive community. And what does that mean? What does it look like? What does it look like across the board? You know, who we hire, how we think about, you know, our events, how do we think, you know, all these different things. I think we haven't really had a lot of input. And I think it will be really important to have that from our community members.
And how do you see I got part of it I was trying to say, like, I think that part's, you know, is great. Do we see it almost as an advisory committee? Or is it almost like in the beginning, there's probably going to be more heavy lifting, and then it can almost be an advisory committee, almost like the ethics board, like when there's issues or questions or comments, or do we anticipate meeting regularly? I guess that's the, you know, because it's, I think we want it to be somewhat all encompassing and looking at, you know, policies and things like that. And again, I think the first time through is very hard, and then
It's a lot.
it's easier.
It's a lot,
And, you know, do we see it being kind of like, you know, whoever wants to sign up, we want to appoint 6 people, like, you know, I think, some of the, we obviously won't decide all this tonight, but the going from kind of the concept of it, which I think we probably all agree is a good idea. And I think, you know, the example of what do we celebrate and why is kind of a good way to kind of frame it. But then I think the other things get harder, you know, like I think that's probably the low hanging fruit piece of it a little bit. I'm not necessarily, but, you know, and I think, you know, again, I think you probably need some kind of staff participation so that it's not just just a group of, you know, volunteers, but, you know, I don't know, that's what I'm kind of thinking out loud, on, you know, the ways will be most effective. So it's a real impactful kind of committee as opposed to like a, you know, a really good committee that we say we have it and, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I sort of envision like a community group that would make recommendations, right? I think this is obviously it's a huge topic. You can go to a lot of different things, right? You can think about like, you know, these committees can think about like hiring and what policies and procedures look like. There's a lot of things, right? And then there probably is some overlapping, right? Like I think we had a lot of these discussions in the police review committee, and a lot of the recommendations came right around these issues came out in the actual report. So I would envision it, you know, really as initially an advisory committee that will come up with sort of, to me, it's probably a multi-year kind of, you know, like coming up with what recommendations, and you probably do start with like low-hanging fruit, right? Like,
So kind of along the lines of like the Green Policy Task Force, where it's almost like a two-way street. Like we have an issue, we need to ask you. You have issues that you want to bring to our attention.
I do think a lot of, and in fact, I think there's a lot of overlap, right? Like I'm the liaison to the Green Policy Task Force, and a lot of what we talk about there is how to, you know, when you talk about green policy, right? does it have any effect if you just issue a policy? How do you implement that across departments? How does that become part of what the village does? So to me, it's sort of a beginning, right? And certainly, I think there are many people in our village that are very capable, and a lot of people who work, just like the Green Policy Task Force, right, that work in this area and have a lot of expertise. So I think it would be important to kind of get that. I envision, by the way, you know, we would ask people, you know, why they want to be involved.
They can almost apply to it.
Right. I think you want to create a committee that's going to be effective and like, you know, maybe moving in that direction of like, how do we define these issues? Like, what do we see in our village that could be impacted by the work of this committee?
So does the board sort of want to give the committee marching orders and defining, or do we want to leave that more open where the committee comes back to the board with a mission statement or something of that nature?
What I'm concerned about is if it's too broad, and it's catching everything,
Yeah.
it's gonna catch nothing. But if it can be targeted, not too targeted, I'm not saying that we don't want to cover things, then we know we have some kind of, not accountability is not the right word, but in other words, we're saying these are the things we did look at, and we know we'll get that looked at.
I almost would prefer it to be advisory, and because I think there are so many different things, and you probably have to start like whatever that's the interest in that committee, like kind of setting out a process, almost like what we did with our priorities, right? Where your priority, you can have so many things, and you maybe look at it and you think like, okay, this is what we might want to accomplish in this first year, right? We might want to look at these things. You know, hiring might be like a longer term thing, right? Not necessarily a shorter term thing. So to me, it's sort of, you know, a little open-ended, but I do think a committee would have to define what it can accomplish, right? Or what it wants to focus on in the short run. Unless people have very strong thoughts about what I personally don't have like strong thoughts about like, we need to change this and do that. Like I see it more as a kind of overall advisory sort of committee that will kind of define areas where we can put some, you know, we can really make sure that we live up to our Irvington is a welcoming and inclusive community.
We wouldn't be in favor of giving kind of like guidance to the committee, like.
No,
here are the areas.
we could give guidance. I'm saying that I personally, like, I would have to think about that, but I also would feel like those are my, you know, like I would feel like I'm guiding too much versus like a group of people who's going to who would volunteer to work on this, and them defining kind of like, here are the areas that we think we could work on in the short run and long term, right?
It was definitely a fine line with the police committee in laying out too much in the beginning versus allowing the committee the freedom to do it. Now, in that case, we allowed the committee a lot of freedom. I mean, really, like we had, I don't want to say we had no direction, but there was almost no direction going in other than what came from the state. And the committee found its way through that.
Yeah.
But that's hard.
And
so
that was a good process, right?
It was very
a
hard.
process.
Yeah, it was a lot of work.
We also had professionals helping them.
And we had, right, exactly. So that's the one, I think that's probably the one extreme. And I think the other extreme is, you know, just laying out a bullet point list and saying, here, go do this. I'm sure that's not what you're doing. So it's a balancing act, but I think somewhere in the middle, there's an answer, and even just giving broad direction, or maybe even you can come to a consensus on what are the broad areas that are most concerned right now, you know, even help prioritize, you know, and then let the committee decide how to address those areas first, you know. I mean, I don't know, it's just leaving it totally open-ended is really labor intensive. That's my only observation.
I think the only good thing is that we don't have the time crunch that we did for the police committee.
That's true.
It's kind of the nice thing. So like,
True.
you know, they come up with 1,000 goals.
Yeah.
You know, we know you're not going to accomplish them by, you know, a March 31st deadline. It's not as, you know, it's not as time crunch sensitive.
Right.
And you can almost see it work either way. Like the board has some, you know, strong priorities. And I think it's probably, for me, it's the things we kind of mentioned as the examples. You know, I think what we can do is we communicate those definitely to the group. But if the group has a bunch of others, you know, I think we'd be happy to listen to them. So
Right, yeah, I don't think anything about like shushing people. But I think to have some direction, I think would be positive.
Yeah, I think that's fine. I mean, I think if I had to, again, I don't want to put my entire, like, my own, like, agenda, I don't want it to be my agenda. I think of it, if I think about in the community, right, like the things that matter, I think, celebrations, for example, like how you include different celebrations, and that is one of the sensitivities I have just from the school, the work that I've done in the school, right? What's included, what's excluded. I think that's a point where people really feel either part of the community or they don't really see themselves in the community. So to me, that's an easier one. That's a pretty easy one, like to think about what we do and what we don't do and sort of address that. I think there are, and if I took it all the way to the other end of that, right, is who do we hire in our village? Like, what is our, it does our village staff reflect like our community, things like that. Those are harder things, right? Because those are more policy, there's training involved there. So to me, there's a really big, there's even training and awareness. I think the police department is a really good example. Like, we talked a lot about the rule of 3 and how difficult it had been to hire people, but in a relatively short period of time, right, Frank was able to do that. And it was expressed as a priority in that committee. And so, hiring to me is like one of those harder, things that maybe people need more expertise and training, but still, like, I think people can make recommendations, right? I think even the police committee, again, is a good example of that, because first we have to sit and learn all about the rule of 30, which nobody really knew anything about until we sat there, except for the police officers. They probably knew that pretty well.
I might have known a little bit about it.
And
too.
you probably, I'm sorry, Larry, of course you did, but talking about us lay people, right?
But we ended up with a subcommittee. It was such a complicated issue
Right.
that we ended up with a subcommittee in order to even work together. I mean, we were all remote on Zoom and all that, but we had to break it down
Yep.
because the issues were so complicated, and some people, frankly, probably didn't care about it. Like, wasn't that important. Others were interested.
Right.
So anyway, it's just.
So that's how I see the range, right? But I also feel like, if we have to me, it has to also be people who sort of believe in making Irvington a, welcoming and inclusive community, so that you don't, I also don't think that's healthy to have a committee that's like, we need to do nothing, right? I don't know, maybe that people will get on there and want to do that. So I am in favor, to me, of being a little bit more open, as I do think a committee would be able to define in this area, kind of like, and again, I would think short-term goals, medium and long-term. In terms of like what things, again, around this theme of a welcoming and inclusive community, and what does that mean?
Right, I guess what I'm saying is, imagine if a committee came back and didn't include those two things that you mentioned in their priority, I think that would be problematic.
Yeah, I mean, you're correct. Yeah, so we could give them examples, right? Like, here's the, I think I wrote you guys and I wrote you an email, Larry, but I'm happy to, like, define these, like, for example, right? Like, I would say, like, for example, here are things that we're thinking about. But I think, to me, a lot of these things are pretty in residence, like, they're probably they're going to come out very quickly, right? In these sort of areas of focus.
But I think ideally it would be a blend, right? It'd be
Yeah.
like the things that the board thinks are important are represented, and the things that the committee generates, the board is listening to the committee.
Yeah.
And that, wow, I never thought of that. That's really interesting. We should really be thinking about that.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, maybe we take an hour at a work session, and kind of hash out the rough edges anyway of what we should do on this.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, you want to have the formation of the committee, you want to have some sort of a broad description of the mission for that committee. And it would be helpful to have some people identified or start working on it anyway. I mean, and then come forward with appointments. So what order that happens, I mean, it would probably be helpful to define what the committee is about, so that when you're going out to the community to talk to people about joining the committee, you can at least tell them what it's all about. Right?
I guess my question is, does anyone have any strong thoughts about what they would want the committee to work on and or not work on?
Well, I mean, the two things that I really thought of were the your two examples, right? Hiring to me is a huge one, right? I think that I've said many times before that all the initiatives that we can think of, you know, affordable housing, all of the things that people come here and like you said, the workforce is not looking like the community, our community could or should be. People are going to be pushed back, and all of the other initiatives are going to be hurt by the fact that we don't have that. But that's one that's very important to me, and I would be disappointed if they couldn't get it done.
Or, you know,
Yeah, I don't have any things I don't want to work on.
Right.
I do think that, celebration is an interesting one because I think for, 100 years, there weren't any new holidays that anyone in the community, that we knew that anyone in the community really cared about almost, it's funny because I have like a trading calendar that has all the holidays and just the Japanese alone and they're off the next 3 days. So I feel like there are so many holidays that it's kind of a, to me, it's almost like you need someone to be the champion of it. Almost what's happened kind of organically with Juneteenth. It kind of came from community interest and then it grew. But I do think that there to have a group that could shepherd those types of things would be great because you're not always going to have a Kelly Scott who's going to just kind of be a force of nature and make something happen. So because to me it's even I think having the Madam C.J. Walker Plaza area is such a great place to celebrate so many holidays and to have it be like, hey, let us know if you have something you want to celebrate. You can think of, probably off the top of our heads, a dozen that would be kind of appropriate and cool to have like acknowledged there, even if it's for songs or, food or whatever it is. Like you kind of, so I think that's kind of but how you do that kind of judiciously, I think is important. So I think those two things are probably, hiring policies and practices. And I think the interesting thing that I've kind of seen with the hiring is that it's almost like the way I view the way that the different departments view the budget now. It's the same thing. It can't be like, the what's it called? The Rooney Rule in football. To me, it's such BS. Like if Frank Pignatelli really didn't want to hire anybody but 30-year-old white guys, I think he probably could have found reasons why it wouldn't work. So you kind of have to have like a buy-in from each of it has to become embedded in like the budget process is. Like it's not, they show up in February with the budget and then try to figure it out. They're working on it all year long and find the most efficient ways, the most cost-effective ways to do things. Now it's the same thing with finding diversity and the best workforce possible. So I think that's I think that's where we have to get it. And again, having a group work with us on the best way to do that. I think obviously a lot of it's leadership as well, but I do think training is important as well. So that's probably the big three for me are probably look at our current trainings. I think we've gone from 0 to 60. Then make sure you're doing the right things. Again, cost effective, time effective. The way it's delivered. You think about it too. If you have one great speaker, it can change people in an hour, or you can go to an online class for a month and not have any effect. Like you have to have good training that people buy in on and all that kind of stuff. So I think there's probably, if I keep talking, I'll probably find there's more that I want to learn. But training, hiring, and celebrations, I think are good places to start anyway. But yeah, I think we need more discussion on this. So if we're done on 50 separate hours,
Do you want to circulate around? I know you sent it to me and to
Yeah.
Brian.
I'll
But if you want to circulate it around to the rest of the board, just so that they have the same information I have, and then, that can be, I think what you wrote is actually the foundation of the mission of the committee, frankly. I mean, in some respects, so we can start assembling that and
Sure. Yeah, so just Larry asked me what I was envisioning, and so I wrote him an email with kind of detailing these things. So I'll share it with everyone.
great.
Next is trustee liaison reports. Mark?
I have nothing new at the exact moment, only to, nothing at the moment. I'll have probably some news next time.
All right, I like the teaser.
Again, I'll reiterate that rec department is getting ready for summer day camp. There's applications available both for summer camp and for Teamscape. Both of those, particularly Teamscape, has only a few spots remaining. There are applications for working in summer camp and Teamscape. Again, summer camp is counselors 16 plus. Teamscape, current high school senior or college students. A reminder that groups of 13 or more will require group park permits for all village parks. Reservation requests to be made online. Youth tennis registration will start on May 10th. The O'Hara Summer Basketball League is starting on Monday, June 27th. On May 10th, there'll be a Mother's Day luncheon for senior citizens. I guess it's not on Mother's Day, it's on Tuesday, May 10th. You can register to attend. Lunch will start 11:45. This Saturday, May 7th, the Riverkeeper River Sweep will once again take place in Scenic Hudson Park. The cleanup is led by Irvington High School student Morgan Balkan. Remember to book your Memorial Park tennis court reservations online. This past Saturday, all 20 spots available for reserving were booked. The Irvington Beautification Committee will be starting their spring planting and work on Main Street. You can contact Joe Archino if you want to help. The Recreation Development Garden Program at Columbia University Nevis Labs is open to registered participants. All spots are filled at this time. Thanks to all volunteers who worked in the Irvington Woods Park this past Saturday, removing invasive barberry bushes. The Irvington Boy Scouts were part of it, and they spent the night camping in the Irvington Woods following that. To register for any Parks and Recreation Department program, go to register.capturepoint.com, or if you're not sure, you can contact any rec staff member.
All right. Mitch?
May 17th is the budget and trustee vote, as per Carol, so we're now make sure we vote. The theater commission met last week. Couple interesting things. One is, so River Arts approached me and asked if I could help them find a location for their music tour. They can have a stop in downtown Irvington. I think there's a home in maybe East Irvington that's involved. When the schedule comes out, we'll see, but there was nothing in the village proper. And I suggested Madam TJ Walker Plaza, which they thought was a great idea. It's the right size for what they look for. They look for 50 to 70 people at each one. So I spoke to Larry and I spoke to the chief, and everyone thought it was a great idea. So we're moving forward. So that's June 4th in the theater. Greg was involved the whole way, and they're going to help publicize it and everything. So they're definitely, the theater's doing a great job of staying involved in things, even though obviously there's no theater right now. They're working with Joe on some summer events, with the rec department. They're also going to have a June 25th concert with aimed toward kids, like it's a band for kids 3 to 7 years old and everything. So that's in progress now. There'll be more about that as everything gets tied up. And I know the one kind of thing related to the renovation is that it looks like there's going to be a change in the location of the HVAC unit. So the design team sent the change order. So I guess that's going to come before us at some point to have to approve that change order so they can get moving on the HVAC system. And I guess I think those are the key pieces to take from the board meeting. And that's all.
Great.
As usual, I get a great report from Greg from Department of Public Works, and I think they do a great job. So that speaks for itself. The Green Policy Task Force is to celebrate the Trails Day on the Old Croton Aqueduct on April 23rd. They had over 30 volunteers. They planted a beautiful pollinator garden, pulled out. It was a lot of work. Really hard work. Clearly not a gardener. But that's it for me. They really did an amazing job there. I'm super impressed with all of them, Daphna and Viola and the whole team of people who were strong. They really did a great job.
Well, Village Administrator's report.
So as a follow-on to the theater discussion, I've been working with the Dormitory Authority of the State of New York, DASNY, to finalize the 2 grants that have been awarded to us for the theater HVAC, the 500,000 and 125,000, I think. So they have, I think they're getting to the final stages of review. That means they should be issuing a contract soon, a grant contract, which you'll see in front of you so that you can authorize me to sign it. So it's moving along.
The design part, is that?
The design is there's some issues with where the HVAC is located.
Yeah.
So
It's like, but.
it's slower than we would have wanted.
Right.
But we're trying to deal with this building is the issue. I
Right.
mean, it would be easy if we were just going to put it all up on the roof and forget about it, but I don't think that's what needs to happen with this building. So. That's it.
Village Clerk Treasurer's report.
We're starting to prepare our capital budget. I've been working with department heads. So we'll put that together and put that in front of the board for review sometime probably later in the month or June. And starting to also prepare our tax bills for the end of the month mailing. Nothing else?
I know everyone's looking forward to that. Village Attorney's report.
Yeah, I just wanted to update the board on the 76 North Broadway, the affordable housing project. They put in their application for the planning board meeting for Wednesday. And they had indicated that they were, goal was a 65 unit project. It turned out, and that was based on the calculation, the site capacity calculation that was done. I guess it was our planner did a projection on it. At first I was thinking it was Dave Smith, but I think it was our planner based on the county map. And under the county, she deducted a certain amount of steep slopes and came up with the number of whatever number that, once you had 20% up to 65. While the Baltimore went out there and did their topographic survey with 2 feet intervals, it turned out that there were more steep slopes they had to deduct. So the total number comes to now 58 units rather than 49. So I mean, really 65. It was 49, and then they 20% full bonus for all affordable, so it comes to 58. Now that's just the maximum. That's their site capacity. It could be determined that the site can't handle that many units or whatever. But you're talking about a max of 58 rather than 65. They'll be before the planning board Wednesday, but just really on site capacity. They have to put in a site plan application.
Right, and that's really just the mathematics.
It's just a mathematical calculation, right? So I'm hoping the public understands that for the meeting Wednesday. I mean, you don't even have to have a public hearing on it. You just do the calculation, planning board does the calculation, essentially. I think so.
Great. Public comment? Anybody at home, Mark? Nope. Action items? Didn't write anything down. So that being the case, I will make the motion to adjourn if I can have a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everybody.